an information item on the oversight of radiation safety officers and radiation protection programs for nuclear substance and radiation devices licensees, as outlined in CMD 17 M44 and M44.A. And I understand, Mr. Moses, the floor is still yours.
Thank you. And before I get into the presentation, I would just like to note that there's clearly a lot of synergy between the item we discussed this morning and earlier this afternoon and this item. And originally we had planned on blending our response to the action item into the report on the regulatory oversight report. But this is a substantive enough and important enough topic that we felt it really did warrant a separate discussion, which is why we have separated out in a different agenda item. So as I said this morning, my name is Colin Moses, and I am the Director General of the Directorate of Nuclear Substances Regulation. With me today are Mr. Peter Funderick, the Director of Nuclear Substance and Radiation Device Licensing Division, Ms. Natalie Clanguette and Mr. Paul Matthews, Licensing Project Officers in the same division, Mr. Keith Dewar, Director of the Regulatory Research and Evaluation Division, and Ms. Geneviève Boudria, Senior Evaluation Officer. And we're also joined by other CNSC staff supporting this initiative. So we are here today to report to you on CNSC staff's initiative to enhance oversight of radiation safety officers and radiation protection programs in the nuclear substances and radiation devices sector, as outlined in CMT 17 M44. This topic has been discussed at previous commission meetings during presentations of our regulatory oversight reports, as well as event reports, and is in response to Commission Action number 8816 to report back on our progress in this area. With over 2,100 licenses across 51 different use types, the CNSC have adopted a risk-informed regulatory program to effectively oversee the large variety of applications within this sector. As was demonstrated through the regulatory oversight report, the use of nuclear substances and radiation devices in Canada remains safe. Licensees are responsible to put in place safety and control measures to control their operations through the implementation of a radiation protection program. These measures are reviewed during CNSC staff's assessment of license applications, and verified through our compliance activities. CNSC staff are closely monitoring trends in the operational structures and performance of certain licensees. In particular, in the academic and medical sectors, many licensees are trending towards more centralized and complex governance structures. These transitions must be effectively managed with due attention to the critical importance of nuclear safety. In a few cases, licensees have struggled with these transitions, triggering the need for regulatory intervention. Further, performance trends and reported events have at times revealed licensee program weaknesses. While these issues have been resolved to the satisfaction of CNSC staff, they do highlight an opportunity to improve licensee programs and regulatory compliance. Recognizing the critical importance of radiation protection program design and implementation to ensuring the safety of licensee operations, and the key role of radiation safety officers in this work, CNSC staff have launched an initiative to both enhance guidance to licensees and to evaluate the key success factors needed to ensure an RSO can adequately perform their duties. We will leverage these activities to share lessons learned and best practices with licensees. I'll now turn the presentation over to Mr. Paul Matthews.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Paul Matthews. I'm a licensing project officer in the Nuclear Substance and Radiation Device Licensing Division in the Directorate of Nuclear Substance Regulation. In today's presentation, CNSC staff will demonstrate plans being undertaken to strengthen CNSC's regulatory oversight of radiation protection programs, including the role of the Radiation Safety Officer for nuclear substance and radiation device licenses. The strategy chosen will strengthen the regulatory framework as well as increase our understanding of the role of a successful radiation safety officer. Through these planned enhancements, CNSC staff will ensure the use of nuclear substances remains safe for the future. Today, CNSC staff will provide background on the CNSC's current approach to the regulatory oversight, how CNSC staff is planning on enhancing this regulatory oversight through strengthening of the regulatory framework and by conducting an evaluation of radiation safety officers in the medical, academic research sectors to identify factors that may lead to success for those persons in the role of radiation safety officer. Before a license can be issued, an applicant must demonstrate they are qualified to undertake the licensed activity. REGDOC 1.6.1 is the license application guide for nuclear substances and radiation devices. This document outlines regulatory requirements for this sector and provides guidance on meeting CNSC expectations. In particular, REGDOC 1.6.1 outlines the duties and responsibilities of radiation safety officers, recognizing that this will vary with the magnitude, diversity, and complexity of their uses of nuclear substances. Through the application process, applicants must demonstrate to CNSC staff that they are qualified and that they have the necessary policies and procedures to ensure safety of their operations. Once a license is granted, the Radiation Protection Program forms part of the basis of licensing and is monitored through licensee internal audit programs. CNSC staff monitor compliance with their programs through compliance activities. The Radiation Protection Program is an essential component to the safe operation of licensed activities. A radiation protection program consists of a number of key elements, including management control over work practices, personal qualification and training, control of occupational and public exposure, and planning for unusual situations. CNSC staff see the radiation safety officer as being critical to the effective implementation and oversight of the Radiation Protection Program. There are a number of people who have key roles in the Radiation Protection Program. The applicant authority is the person that holds overall accountability for the license. Generally, this person holds a role in senior management and has the necessary authority to direct human and financial resources. The applicant authority is accountable and is required to complete and sign the applicant authority form, and by doing so, attests and certifies that they are aware of their obligations and responsibilities under the Act and that the contents of the application is binding. The Radiation Safety Officer is appointed by the applicant authority. The Radiation Safety Officer has the delegated responsibility for the functioning of the Radiation Protection Program, including the ability to stop unsafe work practices. As part of the process to designate a Radiation Safety Officer, the applicant authority must submit the following necessary information: details of duties to be undertaken by the Radiation Safety Officer, copies of curriculum vitae of the prospective Radiation Safety Officer indicating relevant experience, and copies of any training certificates. A licensee must have at least one person designated as a Radiation Safety Officer. CNSC staff continue to see changes to the structure of licensees. Many of these changes are driven by financial or business decisions. In the medical sector, there's a trend to move from a single hospital and single license to multiple hospital, single license across a city, region, or even a province. In the industrial sector, CNSC staff have observed consolidation of licensees through amalgamation, where a licensee acquires another licensee, or where a licensee that possesses multiple licenses of a single use type amalgamates under a single license. When a licensee amalgamates or consolidates, the result may be a more complex license that requires greater resources to manage and to implement the Radiation Protection Program. CNSC staff expect that a licensee undergoing such a transition to prepare for a suitable implementation in situations where the licensee is combining different radiation safety programs. A licensee must have a robust governance and oversight of license activities to ensure that all sites meet their obligations. Regardless of the organizational structure in place, licensees must have a radiation protection program that safely manages their licensed activities. If a radiation protection program is not effectively managed, a licensee may face implementation challenges that, if not addressed, can lead to non-compliances. Weaknesses that have been identified during compliance activities include limited or lack of engagement by senior management, including the applicant authority, inadequate resources provided to oversee the program, insufficient or inadequate program oversight, including limited internal audits, and poor procedural adherence across different sites. CNSC staff have addressed these weaknesses through our compliance program, ensuring that licensees maintain effective programs through any transition. When licensees are undergoing amalgamation to a provincial structure, CNSC staff will engage with the licensee to ensure they give due consideration to nuclear safety through the transition. In addition, CNSC staff will increase regulatory scrutiny to ensure effective implementation of the radiation protection program within the new structure. While effective on a case-by-case basis, there is opportunity to share lessons from previous challenges and best practices of successful licensees more broadly. In order to inform this initiative, CNSC staff have benchmarked our regulatory framework against the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission's, with particular focus on their requirements for radiation safety officers, including educational, professional, and experience requirements. Taking into account the different regulatory schemes, this exercise confirmed that U.S. expectations for radiation safety officers are generally consistent with the CNSC's regulatory framework. The review did, however, identify potential opportunities to enhance guidance for radiation safety officer training and qualifications, and provide additional guidance on radiation protection programs, governance, and oversight. To enhance CNSC oversight of nuclear substances and radiation device licensees, CNSC staff have launched a two-stream initiative which will proceed in parallel. CNSC staff will provide additional guidance to licensees through the production of a comprehensive REGDOC related to radiation protection programs. And to ensure we've captured the necessary elements, we've initiated an evaluation to identify factors leading to success for radiation safety officers. Although CNSC staff will approach the question of radiation safety officer success and radiation protection REGDOC separately, they are closely related, and any resulting solution will incorporate both streams. I'll now pass the presentation over to Madame Nathalie Ringuette.
Bonjour, mon nom est Nathalie Ringuette. Je suis agent de projet des permis de la division des permis de substances nucléaires et d'appareils à rayonnement de la direction des réglementations des substances nucléaires. In the next 4 slides, I will provide an overview regarding the development of a new regulatory document for nuclear substances and radiation devices licensees, provisionally titled Oversight of Radiation Protection Program. Nuclear substances and radiation devices licensees have been asking for practical and detailed guidance on how to develop and oversee a radiation protection program that is appropriate to their license activities and that takes into consideration their unique structure and governance framework. Currently, the expectations with respect to an effective radiation protection program can be found in a number of CNSC publications. In particular, REGDOC 1.6.1, the License Application Guide for Nuclear Substances and Radiation Devices. In addition, Regulatory Guide G121, published by ACB. This document provides information to medical, academic, and research licensees on how to design and implement radiation protection programs. And finally, Regulatory Guide G313, which provides guidance to licensees for developing radiation safety training programs for workers. CNSC staff are developing a new regulatory document for nuclear substance and radiation device licensees that consolidates all guidance under one comprehensive document. This is to facilitate and clarify expectations applicable to the development and implementation of an effective radiation protection program for these specific licensees. Where appropriate, the document will reference other applicable documents, such as documents on radiation protection, safety culture, and management systems. In addition to consolidating information, new content will also be added in the document for the purpose of providing greater guidance to licensees. With the publication of this document, nuclear substances and radiation devices licensees will find in one document all applicable information, as well as licensing expectations for developing their radiation protection program. The document will accommodate the wide variety of governance structures seen in the industry and will incorporate pertinent information obtained from operational experience of radiation protection program implementation. The purpose of this regulatory document is to provide practical guidance on the elements to be incorporated as part of an effective radiation protection program for nuclear substances and radiation devices licensees. Licensees are responsible for safety and designing and implementing a radiation protection program commensurate with the license activity. This shall be in accordance with the ALERA principle established in the radiation protection regulations. As mentioned earlier, the applicant authority is an individual within senior management level with authority to direct financial and human resources. These resources are necessary for maintaining compliance with the licensee's established radiation protection program. The applicant authority must remain actively engaged in overseeing the radiation protection program by allocating necessary resources to improve compliance or correct non-compliances to regulatory requirements. The applicant authority's engagement can also be achieved by setting a direct line of communication with the radiation safety officer on all aspects related to radiation safety. The regulatory document will provide expectations on the roles and responsibilities of the applicant authority to ensure it is clearly understood by this individual that he or she is ultimately accountable for the radiation protection program. The radiation safety officer is delegated by the applicant authority for day-to-day operation of the radiation protection program. This qualified person is selected based on the combination of his or her experience and training. This individual must have full authority to enforce the radiation protection program, and the authority must include the ability to stop any unsafe work practices. The radiation safety officer is the primary liaison between the CNSC and the licensee. This individual is responsible for managing the radiation protection program along with the support of qualified persons at other licensed locations where more than one geographical location is authorized by the license. In addition to details on the roles and responsibilities of the radiation safety officer, the regulatory document will provide some suggested competency requirements to fulfill this role, such as knowledge, training, experience, and education. The regulatory document will provide additional guidance and clear expectations supporting the information requested as part of the license application process. The guidance will be tailored to address the challenges identified with the design and implementation of an effective radiation protection program for nuclear substances and radiation devices licensees. The regulatory document will describe the necessary elements of a radiation protection program, including policies and procedures. The document will also describe expectations for program oversight, including a licensee's internal audit process. A radiation protection program must include a clear organizational structure which defines the authority and responsibility of each person involved in overseeing the radiation protection program. These individuals are mainly the applicant authority and the radiation safety officers. The radiation safety officer, including his or her designates, must have sufficient authority for overseeing the radiation protection program. The licensee shall ensure that the management structure of the radiation protection program aligns with the organization being licensed, which can be unique to each licensee due to their governance structure. The role of the Radiation Safety Committee is to act as an advisory committee and to provide advice and direction to the Radiation Safety Officer on the development and implementation of an effective radiation protection program. The regulatory document will provide guidance on its roles and responsibilities the recommended membership and meetings frequency for those licensees that would benefit from a radiation safety committee. An important factor to consider when establishing a radiation safety committee is to have representation from groups involved with or impacted by the license activity. Essentially, there should be a representative from each impacted group occupying a seat on the Radiation Safety Committee. I will now turn the presentation to Mr. Keith Dewar to describe the evaluation process.
Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Keith Dewar, Director of the Regulatory Research and Evaluation Division. I'm here today with Geneviève Boudria, who is the Senior Evaluation Officer and will be lead evaluator for this evaluation. I'll begin by noting that although evaluation is a relatively common word, program evaluation has a defined meaning within the Government of Canada. In essence, it is a systematic approach to assessing the performance of programs, policies, and processes. Performance in this context means whether and under what conditions a program is effective at achieving its desired impacts or is efficient in delivery. To arrive at these judgments, it uses research methods that are similar to those of social science and uses tools such as the ones described on this slide to generate multiple lines of evidence from which to draw its conclusions. Although many factors contribute to the success of licensee radiation protection programs, this evaluation will specifically try to assess the contribution of RSOs to radiation program success, and it will specifically try to understand those RSO-related factors that are important to or barriers to program success. These include such things as the hard and soft skills possessed by the RSO, organizational structure and governance factors, and the institutional support that the RSO receives, amongst other factors. The evaluation has been scoped to focus on the medical and academic research sectors, as has been described. These sectors were chosen primarily as they're the most complex and similar in RSO functioning. Adding the industrial and commercial sectors would increase, of course, the evaluation effort and time. In undertaking the evaluation, we propose to conduct extensive engagement with the RSO and related stakeholder community. We are planning an electronic survey of the entire RSO population of the medical, academic, and research sectors, the 380 numbers shown on this slide. We'll conduct a large number of semi-structured interviews with over 40 people, including RSOs, applicant authorities, and nuclear energy workers, researchers, etc. And in this case, semi-structured means that the questions will be defined in advance, but the interviewees will also have a chance to give us open-ended responses to the questions. We will also undertake a detailed comparison between our RSO approach and the work that's already been done to compare the US and Canada, but we'll look at other international practices such as the UK and, as possible, other similar roles in Canada like the Occupational Health and Safety Workplace Safety Advisor. We've already engaged a number of RSOs who've been actively working in these sectors to help us design the evaluation and to make sure the questions the evaluation will examine are valid. The evaluation terms of reference are in draft and will likely be approved by a high-level advisory committee later this month. I'll now turn the presentation back to Mr. Colin Moses.
Thank you. As mentioned, the regulatory document development and the evaluation project are proceeding in parallel. By the second quarter of 2018-19, the results of the evaluation program will be known, allowing us to incorporate information from the evaluation into the draft REGDOC and release a document for external consultation in the third quarter. Feedback from the consultation will be considered and incorporated into the document as appropriate, with publication of the REGDOC currently planned for the second quarter of 2019-20. As you heard in this morning's regulatory oversight report for the use of nuclear substances, the use of nuclear substances in Canada is safe. This is borne out by observation from the licensing and compliance verification activities, and the CNSC has a strong regulatory framework backed by an effective risk-informed licensing and compliance program that can address non-compliances in situations where a licensee deviates from regulatory requirements or CNSC expectations. Where problems have been identified, the CNSC has managed the licensee on a case-by-case basis using existing regulatory approaches. However, the licensee landscape has and is changing, and when not effectively managed, this transition can expose weaknesses in licensee programs. Using the experience gained through our regulatory oversight activities, CNSC staff will enhance guidance provided to licensees on the design and implementation of radiation protection programs, sharing and emphasizing best practices with the industry, and ensuring licensees put in place a framework that supports the success of the radiation safety officer. We remain available to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you.